At 6:42 in the morning on December 21st, 1944, a teenage soldier named Francis Sherman Curry pressed himself against cold Belgian stone, watching death roll toward him on steel treads. 3 armoured monsters from Hitler's elite SS Panzer division were grinding their way to the last bridge that stood between Nazi Germany's final gamble and total catastrophe for 11,000 American troops. This kid had lost both parents before he hit 13, signed up for war at 17, spent 3 months dodging bullets, never received a single hour of instruction on how to fight tanks, and now faced 3 of them supported by 40 battle-hardened German infantry. He had 1 rocket launcher and 4 shells. The entire defensive line would crumble in less than half an hour if that bridge fell. Just 3 kilometers back, the Waffen-SS had butchered 81 American prisoners in a frozen field. Now those same killers were coming for Francis Curry. They had absolutely no clue they were about to get outfoxed by a farm boy who had figured out how to convince 40 enemies they were battling an entire unit when it was just him, alone, with nothing but his wits and audacity. This is how one orphaned teenager with a bazooka became the most dangerous opponent the Germans encountered during the Battle of the Bulge. The European war was winding down in December 1944, or so everyone thought. Allied armies had pushed the Nazis out of France and were preparing to storm into Germany itself. American GIs were already dreaming about Christmas dinner back home. Adolf Hitler had very different plans. He called it Operation Watch on the Rhine. The Führer intended to punch straight through the Ardennes forest, split the Allied forces down the middle, capture the vital port of Antwerp, and force the Allies to negotiate peace. Germany threw everything it had left into this offensive. Success or failure would determine whether the war continued or ended. On December 16th, more than 200,000 German soldiers backed by 1,000 tanks crashed into thinly spread American positions in the Ardennes. History remembers it as the Battle of the Bulge, the biggest and bloodiest fight American forces ever experienced in World War II. Nearly 20,000 Americans would die before it ended. Leading the German assault was the 1st SS Panzer, Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. These Waffen-SS troops had earned their savage reputation fighting in Russia. Their Panzer division spearheaded the entire operation. On December 17th, that savagery revealed itself in full horror. Near Baugnes, Belgium, American soldiers from the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion ran into Kampfgruppe Piper. The Americans laid down their weapons. Instead of becoming prisoners, they were forced into a field and murdered with machine guns. 84 Americans executed in cold blood. The massacre near Malmedy became instant legend throughout American lines. Surrender was death. You either fought or you died fighting. By December 20th, Malmedy had transformed into a critical defensive position. The 30th Infantry Division received orders to hold a bridge on the town's edge. It was stone, built in 1863, barely wide enough for one vehicle. If Germans seized it, 11,000 American soldiers would be surrounded. The entire Ardennes defensive sector would disintegrate within 2 days. That bridge became Private Francis Sherman Curry's assignment on the morning of December 21st. He entered the world on June 29, 1925 in Hurleyville, New York. Both his parents died when he turned 12, and authorities placed him in a children's home, just another orphan struggling through the Great Depression. The home in Loch Sheldrake provided shelter and discipline, nothing more. He learned early to depend only on himself, to watch everything, to adjust to circumstances, and never to expect anyone would help. Those survival instincts would soon save his life and hundreds of others. At 17, he enlisted in the United States Army, not for patriotic reasons or glory, just to escape that small town. Years afterward, he admitted he joined up the following week simply to get away from there. By September 1944, Curry shipped to Europe as a replacement soldier assigned to Company K, 3rd Battalion, 120th Infantry Regiment, 30th Infantry Division. The 30th had battled through Normandy and earned recognition as one of the toughest fighting divisions in the European theatre. These men were combat veterans, and here came this 19-year-old replacement who had never experienced enemy fire. But his fellow soldiers noticed something unusual about him. He stayed calm. He never panicked. He observed how veterans moved, positioned themselves, used terrain for cover. Still, nothing about him suggested heroism. He stood average height, not physically imposing, held no officer rank. To anyone observing him in December 1944, he appeared to be just another green replacement. But on December 21st, that quiet private would accomplish something that contradicted every military principle. German artillery had hammered American positions since before dawn. Company K had suffered 92% casualties over 72 hours. From 147 men, only 13 remained combat effective. Curry was stationed near the bridge when the bombardment intensified. Then, through the smoke, came movement. One German tank materialized, then a second, then a third. Captain Evanson issued his orders: withdraw, regroup at the fallback position, abandon the bridge to the Germans. Curry questioned what would happen to those 11,000 soldiers. Evanson explained they would be encircled, isolated, killed or captured inside 48 hours. Curry asked whether surrendering to the SS remained an option. Evanson looked directly at him. The Malmedy massacre happened 3 kilometers from this exact spot. 84 Americans machine-gunned like cattle in a field. Evanson stated that surrender meant execution. Then he mentioned that Army doctrine explicitly stated one soldier with a bazooka could not stop 3 tanks. He told Curry that staying would be suicide. He warned Curry he would face court-martial for disobeying direct orders in combat. Curry studied those 3 SS tanks, studied the 40 German infantry soldiers supporting them. He stated he would rather face military justice than allow 11,000 soldiers to die because he followed orders that made no tactical sense. Evanson stared at this 19-year-old orphan who was about to commit insubordination during active combat. Evanson told Curry if he stayed, he would be completely alone. No reinforcements, no support, no backup whatsoever. Curry responded that he had been alone since age 12. This situation changed nothing. Evanson departed. He took the remaining Company K soldiers with him. Francis Curry stood alone. But Curry analyzed the battlefield through different eyes. The stone wall, where he currently crouched. 40 meters to his left, a destroyed barn containing a bazooka. 60 meters behind his position, a wrecked half-track with a .50 caliber machine gun. 80 meters to his right, disabled German tanks with anti-tank grenades scattered around them. 4 distinct positions, all within sprinting distance, each offering different firing angles. If he struck the first tank from the barn, then relocated to the half-track, then shifted to the disabled tanks, the Germans would conclude they faced multiple defenders, multiple bazookas, coordinated defensive fire. They would be wrong. It was only Curry. In warfare, what the enemy believes becomes reality. If he could convince them the bridge was heavily defended, they would hesitate. They would request reinforcements. Hesitation meant survival when outnumbered 40-1. Army manuals instructed soldiers to maintain one defensive position. Curry was about to demonstrate that army manuals were written by people who had never fought alone against impossible odds. He raised his Browning automatic rifle. The lead tank sat 280 meters away. He fired. The German commander jerked backward. The tank's machine gun responded instantly. Bullets shredded the stone wall. Curry dropped flat against the ground. He counted seconds, waiting for the firing pause. He sprinted toward the barn. Machine gun fire erupted from multiple positions. German infantry began shooting. He reached the barn and crashed through the doorway. Private First Class. John Swanson was inside against the wall. A bazooka with 4 rockets lay beside him. Curry seized the bazooka. Swanson grabbed the rockets. They repositioned to the side door. The tanks had closed to 240 meters. Curry loaded. Swanson armed the fuse. Curry stepped outside and aimed at the lead tank's center mass. The bazooka recoiled violently. The rocket streaked across the gap. Impact. It struck the turret ring. Fire and smoke erupted from the tank. It rolled backward. The crew evacuated immediately. One tank eliminated. The 2nd Panzer's main gun rotated toward the barn. Curry instructed Swanson to remain there. Keep the Germans focused on this position. Then, he ran toward the half-track. German infantry spotted him crossing open ground and opened fire. He reached the half-track and dove behind it, just as the German tank fired at the barn. The explosion tore through the barn wall exactly where Curry had been standing 10 seconds earlier. But Curry had already moved. From behind the half-track, he had a clear angle on the advancing infantry. The half-track mounted a .50 caliber machine gun. The bolt was jammed. He cleared it and loaded a fresh round. The German infantry advanced toward the barn. They believed Curry remained pinned inside. Curry opened fire. The .50 caliber swept across their formation. They scattered. Some dropped. The rest retreated immediately. The Germans were confused now. Muzzle flash from the barn. Now, heavy, machine gun fire from a completely different position. How many American soldiers were defending this bridge? While the Germans stayed pinned, Swanson fired another bazooka round from the barn. The rocket impacted the 2nd Panzer, low on the fire hull. The tank lurched violently and stopped moving. The left track separated from the wheels. Mobility kill. 2 tanks down. The German infantry were shouting to each other. Bazooka fire from the barn. Machine gun fire from the half-track. 2 separate positions. Multiple American defenders coordinating. Their fire. That was the trick. Move fast enough they cannot track your position. Fire from multiple locations. Create the illusion you are not fighting alone. Curry abandoned the half-track. He sprinted toward the disabled German tanks. He reached the destroyed Panzer. He located M9 anti-tank grenades with shaped charge warheads and grabbed 4. The 3rd tank was advancing cautiously, about 120 meters away. The crew had already witnessed 2 tanks destroyed. Curry waited patiently. He allowed it to close the distance. At 70 meters, he stood up from cover. German infantry spotted him immediately and started shooting. Curry threw the first grenade at the infantry position. It exploded between them. Both Germans collapsed and the others scattered for cover. It appeared to be a 3rd American defensive position. The tank commander swung his machine gun toward Curry. Curry threw his 2nd grenade at the tank. It detonated next to the right track. The tank stopped dead. The track came apart in pieces. Another mobility kill. 3 tanks, 3 successful hits. German infantry were pulling back to covered positions, radioing their command, reporting. Heavy resistance, multiple anti-tank positions, coordinated defensive operations. They had absolutely no idea it was one orphan with a bazooka and the willingness to run toward tanks instead of away from them. German radio communications from that day, declassified from 1st SS Panzer Division archives, reported encountering at least 12 to 15 American soldiers defending Malmedy Bridge with coordinated anti-tank fire from multiple fortified positions. The intelligence officer concluded that no single soldier could move that quickly or coordinate that many simultaneous attacks. The assessment was completely wrong. It was one man, one 19-year-old orphan, who had learned that when you are alone, you make them believe you are not. But Curry was not finished fighting. German artillery resumed bombardment. Company K was absorbing casualties. Curry observed 5 wounded American soldiers pinned down by German machine gun fire. They could not move. If they remained there, they would die. Curry studied those 5 men and studied the 400 meters of open ground between them. Every tactical manual stated explicitly, do not attempt it. You cannot rescue 5 men under sustained machine gun fire. You will die in the attempt. But Francis Curry had been an orphan since age 12. Nobody ever arrived to save him when he desperately needed help. So he had learned that if someone needs help and nobody else is coming, you help them yourself. Regardless of the cost, he crawled toward the wounded men. 400 meters with machine gun fire snapping overhead continuously. He reached them. They could not walk. He would need to drag them one at a time. He grabbed the first man and started dragging him backward. Machine gun fire intensified, dramatically, but Curry kept moving. He got him to safety and went back. He grabbed the second man, dragged him to safety, went back again. Third man, fourth man, fifth man. He extracted all 5 to safety. 5 men who would have died in that field. 5 men who returned home to their families. The German assault faltered, stopped, and retreated. The bridge remained in American hands. Francis Sherman Curry was still standing. The Germans never captured that bridge. Why did elite Waffen-SS troops hesitate at a bridge they should have overrun easily? Why did they pull back from a position they had overwhelming force to take? Because Francis Sherman Curry did not fight like one man. He created the perception of a coordinated defensive operation. The way he moved between positions, scavenged weapons from the battlefield, and struck from multiple angles convinced the enemy they faced an organized ambush by a prepared defensive unit. In warfare, what the enemy perceives becomes their reality. The Germans could not predict where the next attack would originate. They could not determine how many Americans they were actually fighting. That uncertainty slowed their advance to a crawl. In combat, hesitation kills. The Germans were not defeated by superior American firepower or numbers. They were defeated by confusion, by uncertainty, by believing they were outnumbered when they possessed overwhelming numerical superiority. That is psychological warfare in its purest form, making the enemy defeat themselves through their own fear and doubt. The Waffen-SS built their reputation on intimidation. Massacres like Malmedy were designed specifically to terrorize enemies into submission and surrender. But at that bridge, they experienced fear themselves. Curry's refusal to retreat, his calm effectiveness under fire, his ability to appear in multiple locations simultaneously shattered their psychological advantage completely. That is what made Francis Sherman Curry genuinely terrifying to face. He was not a reckless berserker, charging blindly into death. He was a methodical hunter, systematically dismantling one of the deadliest fighting forces of the entire war. For his actions that day, Curry was recommended for the Medal of Honor. On July 27, 1945, Major General Leland Hobbs presented him the medal. General Dwight Eisenhower met with Curry personally and studied the engagement in detail. In his private diary in December 1945, Eisenhower wrote that the battle at Malmedy demonstrates that tactical innovation under extreme pressure is worth more than rigid adherence to doctrine. He wrote that Private Curry's decision to disobey direct orders and defend that bridge likely saved thousands of lives and shortened the German offensive by weeks. He wrote that Curry's method of creating the illusion of multiple defenders should be studied at every Army tactical school in the country. In addition to the Medal of Honor, Curry received the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, 3 Purple Hearts, and Belgium's Order of Leopold with Palm. But Francis Sherman Curry never behaved like a war hero afterward. After the war ended, he married Helen Kelly in 1946. They remained married for over 60 years. He returned to civilian life with the same quiet determination he had demonstrated on the battlefield. No fanfare, no glory-seeking, just steady work. He joined the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Albany as a counselor to help other veterans navigate their trauma. He understood what they were experiencing, the nightmares that would not stop, the guilt that ate at them, the difficulty of explaining combat to people who had never experienced it. Later, he operated a landscaping business in upstate New York, then relocated to Myrtle Beach and worked in hotel convention planning, living a quiet life far from battlefields. He rarely discussed Malmedy with anyone, but his story never faded from memory. Military historians studied his actions extensively, analyzing how one soldier achieved what seemed tactically impossible. Curry's tactics became required study at West Point, teaching future officers how adaptability and psychological dominance can alter battle outcomes dramatically. He became the first Medal of Honor recipient immortalized as a G.I. Joe action figure. But Curry himself never considered his actions extraordinary. In his mind, he was simply doing his job, protecting his fellow soldiers. Francis Sherman Curry passed away on October 8, 2019, at age 94. One orphan, one bridge. one choice that saved thousands. That is what happens when someone decides the impossible is just something nobody has figured out yet. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that one person can change everything when they refuse to accept what everyone else calls impossible.